Yo, what's up, man?
Yo, yo, how you doing?
Good, man. How was golf yesterday?
Very good, very fun. I mean,
Good.
I
Good.
didn't shoot too well, but it was a good time. Always a good time.
Yeah, you're like me, where basically you hit a few good shots and it brings you back, right?
Yeah, you get the
Yeah,
birdie on the par three, and it's just like I can do that every time.
yeah. As weird as I've golfed maybe like I'm 41 and I've golfed maybe like 20 sometimes in my entire life, so I picked it up a little bit late, but I mean, it's definitely awesome. So, um, you got a bunch of courses out by you guys?
Honestly, not too many. I usually will like to drive like an hour or 2 hours to Des Moines, Iowa, is kind of
Okay,
where a bunch of the courses are located out here. And so if I am going to a local course, there's like five to choose from, but really like 15 that really kind of pick from on any given day.
gotcha. Well, I mean, you saw my email that I was rattling off old Iowa State players there, and that guy asked me, "Do you know who Tim Dwight is?" And I immediately thought of you. I'm like, Rob will be so proud right now that I'm just busting out kick returner Tim Dwight. I believe he played for the 49ers, right? Or like, who was his NFL
Falcons,
career with?
Falcons.
Falcons. Okay, yeah, dude was a beast at Iowa, though, man. So,
Oh yeah. One
oh,
of
cool.
the most dynamic players in Iowa football history.
Also, Steve Suter, as I'm wearing my Maryland. This has a little Maryland states of Maryland on it. I don't know if you can see it's a rowback and the Maryland flag on the back. So
There we
figured,
go.
yeah, I figured I'd wear my themed shirt. But yeah, man, thanks for joining. I was obviously don't know how to really use this that much, and I was gonna pick an intro song for you. What would your intro song be if you came in?
Shoot, I have no clue. Probably something classic rock like Def Leppard, I'm thinking, or
Okay,
AC/DC.
okay.
Yeah, those are right up my alley.
What about Whitesnake? Like here I go again on my own.
I wasn't too big into Whitesnake growing up, like Bon Jovi, I guess, from that
Okay,
same time period. It was like I'm thinking about all the walk-up songs I used when I played baseball, and
okay,
it kind of fell into that little lexicon.
gotcha. So I was in my buddy's wedding, like one of my best friend's weddings a couple years ago, and he called me ahead of time and was like, "Hey, by the way, I have a little surprise for you. The DJ and I do." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, God knows what's going to happen, right? So all the groomsmen line up. They start playing "Many Men" by 50 Cent. I'm like, okay, great song. First one goes out. Second one goes out. I told my date, I'm like, there might be something going on here, and she goes, really? I'm like, yeah, just trust me. So we're next, and we're getting ready to walk out, and then the guy goes, hold on for a second. Looks at the DJ, goes like this. They start playing "Call Me Maybe" by Carly Rae Jepsen. As I come out, do my little thing. So it's like that is my new roll up and like my new intro song everywhere I go. So still a hot jam, man. So
Yep, still topical.
awesome. Well, we'll get started a little early, man. So really appreciate the time. I know you're super busy, and looks like my Orioles are taking care of your 3 unit bet on the over here. Game's at 8 right now, right?
Yeah, and it was both kind of lineups actually jumping out early and just being like, you know what, let's just get this done and wrap it up before the first five frames even close out of here.
Well, Sagano in the summer equals lots of runs for the other team, so I'm sure 5 is not going to
Yep.
hold for the Orioles. But they keep reeling me back in with like 3 or 4 wins here, but we'll be sellers of the deadline, and then we'll see how it goes. But on the college
Mhm.
football, man, obviously, you're great at everything, your bread and butter. But do you want to promote your Twitter handle and all your stuff that you got going on real fast?
Hey, for those who want to follow my college football bets or my Major League Baseball bets during this season, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and then also just my YouTube channel, Rob Donaldson, are the two places the best to find me.
And if you haven't seen a Rob Donaldson heater, it feeds families. Like Rob, you could say you're sending the people through college with some of those heaters, especially the conference tournament heater that you were on, what, like 2 years ago. I think you like were, I mean, all those mid-major conferences. My buddy was like, "Dude, Rob is," and that's when we started following you. I was like, "This guy is just amazing." I don't know how he knows all of this stuff, but yeah, I really appreciate the time here, man. So, I guess we'll just kind of jump into, what are we, about a month away from week 0, like kind of a month and a week away from that.
Yeah, closing in.
Yeah, biggest storyline obviously is UNC. We'll touch on that with Bill Belichick, but I guess what are 3 storylines that you're kind of looking at overall, or maybe just in week 1, kind of things that you're focusing on this season?
Well, coming up through just kind of like building up my brand and building up my platform, I never really actually started with sports betting. It was starting with the NFL draft content and breaking down college football just in general. And I got really hands-on with the whole process. I was at the Reese's Senior Bowl year after year, the East West Shrine Bowl, and I worked with a lot of different like scouting companies that came and have gone over the years. And so in doing that, I really grew an affinity towards like the G5 level and the
Right.
FCS. But when you are talking about it from like what people really can hold on to, it's really like the G5. And now that the G5 has a guaranteed representative in the, college football playoff, for me, one of my favorite storylines year in and year out is always going to be who could potentially be that team. And,
Absolutely.
there are a number, and Boise State was fantastic last year. I think they were deserving of that spot, but I feel like with the transfer portal sort of almost rebalancing college football in a way, I think we're going to see really a lot of G5s emerge to the surface and be a contender in that spot, and maybe even be more like a little bit more formidable as well.
We know it won't be Kent State though, correct?
I think it's a safe bet.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was wondering if Kent State's going to be the ultimate Rob Donaldson fade. So we'll talk about that later. Who your teams that you're going to be fading this year are. But yeah, man, to touch on that point, I mean, I remember like almost kind of thinking there's no chance Army or Navy makes it. Like off to the start, that Army was on, and I was trying to think of some of those teams this year that would be there. And we're going to touch on kind of the college football playoff later and who could crash the party. So hold that thought, on kind of some group of 5 teams, but. Anything else kind of drawing your interest, whether it's major Power 5 conferences or Heisman storylines? We're going to touch on that a little bit later too. But any other thing drawing your interest?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value when you actually look at like the player awards market, or even just how a quarterback can elevate a team and like the futures wins department as well. And when you're going down the list, like I get it, there are some really top tier teams in the sport when you look at conference by conference, but I think some of those teams in the middle of, say, the Big Ten or the SEC, I feel like there's a lot of stock for them to actually rise up and sort of surpass what they've been sitting at just in recent years. So I think when you look at the Heisman market, those are kind of the teams or even the players that I like to target. And I think there's a ton of value on the board from that standpoint too.
I would definitely throw a little flyer on LSU to win the Natty because I do think Nussmeier could be in the running for the Heisman, and Brian Kelly, regardless of what people think about him, he does get the job done. And the SEC just they're going to get a bunch of teams in, so all you got to do is get into the dance. You saw that with Ohio State last year, as what the 8 or 9 seed kind of getting in. Which we digress on the seeding with the college football playoff there. I know they're changing it, but yeah, not a great draw for Oregon there last year. There's a player that I'm kind of targeting that I think could sneak into the Heisman race. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I guess just one thing, to touch on that, like, what conference do you think outside the SEC and Big Ten, is there one that could get multiple representatives? Like, kind of maybe looking at the Big 12 when that guy was growing me on Iowa State football. Like, I think Texas Tech could possibly be a sleeper. I don't know how Baylor's supposed to be. Kansas State is always there. With there being 12 teams and the group of 5 representative, is it theoretical with, the SEC going down to one less conference game now that any other group could get 2 to 3 teams in any of the other power conferences?
It's always possible, but ultimately what's going to come down to is, hey, can you handle business at a conference against, these other power conference teams? Because that's what really gets debated on the back end. Is it fair? No, because all these teams are starting off in the first 4 weeks on similar playing fields, but maybe some are far more developed than others just based on experience or familiar with the coaching staff, familiarity with like just how they want to run things. And heck, they might not even have their true starting quarterback by the first 4 weeks either. So I think from that standpoint, you still got to handle business because the resumes are really what matters right now. And unfortunately for the Big 12, unfortunately for the ACC, because of these inherent biases against them, they got to handle and sort of like build up their resumes at a conference so that their in-conference wins actually matter a little bit more.
Absolutely, and we all love the good non-conference, the juicy non-conference matchups, and it's sad that some teams have to do that because it affects their resume. But it's kind of what makes college football great and unique in a sense. We hate it, but without those matchups, it'll be very, very dull. So I'm glad that we still have that for sure. So I guess just, man, heading into week 1 and just overall futures bets, I guess what might be some good futures plays that you're rocking right now, or that you're going to rock? Maybe a couple of the best futures, whether it's team win total, and what do you see with UNC, man? I mean, could it blow up in Bill Belichick's face, or is he just going to be the man like he was in the NFL?
Well, last time we saw Bill Belichick, he wasn't the man, right? It was kind of like he was almost getting forced out of New England, even though the storylines on the back end, Robert Kraft was spinning it real well. Like, no, we're just moving on. It's time to part ways. You don't part ways with somebody who's winning Super Bowls, though, and that's not what he was winning at the back end of his career. And so, how does he transition for the first time in his life going into a D1 college? Obviously, he didn't play D1 football either. I don't know. I feel like that's the ultimate question mark, and because the hype that surrounds it, that's like an ultimate fade. Just right off the bat of my head, it's just like I don't want anything in terms of like backing that side. Maybe I don't want to bet against Bill Belichick, but I'm not going to be like, oh, that's the ultimate value piece at play in college football because everybody's riding it. Now,
Yeah.
when you are looking at, like the SEC, for example, and you're looking at Carson Beck and the quarterback situation at Georgia, you're looking at Florida and kind of, how are they going to live up to the upside potentially this season? And even Tennessee, now Nico Iamaleava is out of the fold there. I think that opens the door for a team like a Texas A&M in year 2 of Mike Elko to say,
Mhm.
hey, Tennessee 5 years ago wasn't a contender really. That was pre-Hendon Hooker, and they were kind of like an 8-5, 9-3 type of team. Well, all of a sudden, I think the door is wide open, and Texas A&M has got a pretty good squad this season.
Rob, I'm just picturing you putting them in the video in like week 8 after they come off of a big win, and I'm like, I don't want to be a believer, but Rob tells me to believe, and then they're going to lay an egg. But I'll trust your opinion on that. And as far as Belichick, what they're laying, what 3.5, or have you seen an opening line against TCU?
I have not, but that does kind of seem right to me if I had to gauge.
Well, hopefully he doesn't take advice from Larry Eustace on how to handle those college parties. But if I see Bill Belichick with Jordan at a kegger there, then I might have to lay the wood on UNC because who knows, things could only go up from there. But could you imagine him walking into a college party? Like it'll just
I mean,
be
he's dating a college girl, so I mean, we're already
uh,
halfway there.
yeah. Yeah. Now, I guess to touch on that, is a team like out of the Big 12, like a Texas Tech, could they be a team that spoils the party? And I mean, what needs to go right for those teams? Is it simply, hey, you just landed a great transfer, and everything comes together? I mean, how much does schedule play into it? I would assume a big factor. But is there a team in the Power Conference that you say, hey, keep your eye on, and they might be our darling this year, and we don't know it?
Well, when I think about, Texas Tech, and even last year, they were making a little bit of a run at an undefeated stretch before kind of the wheels fell off the wagon, so to speak. And I feel like to an extent, that's always a possibility. Heck, Indiana obviously turned their
Yep.
entire season around with just one season, one head coaching hire. But that was kind of a drastic example where the entire portal class was a different team that was already previously successful in college football. And so I don't think that in college football you can just kind of import success right away from the portal. Even if you bring in, the best quarterback like a Nico Iamaleava, I don't think that UCLA is all of a sudden now just like a contender in the Big Ten. Like I don't think that that's kind of how that dynamic works. When you're talking about 22 impactful players on one roster being the difference, as opposed to basketball where it's like 1 out of every 5 can really make a true difference.
Right.
But yeah, when you look at the Big 12, I think it's wide open for a team like an Iowa State to just be ahead and be that team that I think a lot of people are trying to peg them in as. And I also think Kansas State, after a really disappointing year, have all the tools to really kind of emerge as maybe that one team that actually gets in as an at-large if they can handle business at a conference. So absolutely, I think that door is wide open for a number of different teams.
This is how good you are previewing a week 1 matchup right there without even planning to do that,
You're
Rob.
right.
So, yeah, out in Ireland. So, I'm sure there's a huge Kansas State and Iowa State contingent out in Ireland, but, yeah, man, I mean, great stuff there, and I guess just maybe touch on a little coaching there. So, obviously, the ACC has its flaws, and, I kinda think NIL has passed Dabo by. Now it's tough to say, hey, after they won the ACC last year, but it wasn't typical Clemson fashion. How many years can Clemson kind of just toil in the hey, we're 9-4, yet we won a weak conference for Dabo to keep his job? And I mean, is that a program that if they struggle early, could you see him getting let go or moving, or is he kind of just enshrined there and they're just going to deal with what they do and hope they get a good transfer portal in, even though he doesn't really embrace that?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of this could fall into like head coaching purgatory where you can't fire the guy. Like he has brought more to the program than anybody before him, and he is still relatively young and he's still winning games. It's not like he's falling off this entire cliff where he's going 5-7 or 4-8. They're still in the mix every single year. Heck, they just made the college football playoff last season. And I think from that standpoint, there is going to come a time where Dabo is going to need to adapt or he's just going to die, because you can't roster build the same way anymore. There are 2 to 3 year windows in college football now. There's not a, hey, we're going to wait until our guys are 5th year seniors and 4th year juniors, or, just we're loaded with a bunch of vets, because those vets are going to come from the portal because everybody's transferring out if they don't get playing time within the first 2 years. So I do think it's a definite adapt or die situation for Dabo. And right now, just based on his demeanor and how he's talked about the portal, I just think he's going to be one of those coaches that goes out on his sword, and that's how his tenure kind of ends.
Yeah, it would be quite the interesting way to go out. And I mean, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that. And that's kind of maybe part of the reason why Saban got out, ahead of time. And, week one bet, I would say that I would be all over would be Alabama to crush Florida State if it were in the Saban area. Because, especially after Thomas Castellanos comes running his mouth, that would just be fuel for Alabama. But I do root for the Tide. Obviously, University of Maryland basketball diehard, but football, we're picked 16th. Been an Alabama fan since kind of Saban first started there. So I was a big proponent of the DeBoer hire. Is this a rebound year for Bama, or can they kind of expect another 9-3, 9-4 year? And does that get DeBoer fired? Or I guess what are your expectations for them? And do they beat Florida State by like 15, 16 points in week one?
Yeah, it's so tough when you take over after a head coaching legend, let alone arguably the best head coach in all of the entire sport, professional and college. And that's what, DeBoer is having to do right off the bat. And it's not like he had a ton of seasons racked up where he was wildly successful at Fresno State and Washington. It was like a pretty rapid climb to where he's at now. And now all of a sudden Alabama is overseeing this whole identity switch in an area, by the way, that, Alabama, I get it. Nick Saban got those guys in the building when, they were rolling all these 5 stars. They had 5 stars in their 3 deeps half the time.
Right.
But it's not like it's an attractive destination, objectively speaking. And now when everybody has this NIL advantage in their, back pocket, we even saw Nick Saban struggle at the back end of his tenure at Alabama, trying to keep his guys, trying to even get the best talent accrued. And obviously they didn't win a championship in his final couple seasons there as well. So I think it's a really uphill battle. And I think because of the expectations being what they are, DeBoer is almost like destined to fail unless he just pulls something wildly out of his butt, which is always possible. I mean, he's a smart coach. He's an offensive mind. That's where the way the sport is engineered. But I wouldn't really be betting on his tenure to end up as one of those magical ones where they get back to prominence.
So just to recap things, Rob will never be doing a show from the Houndstooth Sports Bar in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, obviously, right? Unless we're on Todd McShay's tab. I don't know if you heard that story, but that's another. Well, I'll digress on that one. But you mentioned the play. I mean, you mentioned the school, Indiana, and this kind of leads me to the Heisman voting. I do think Mendoza could be a guy who could kind of come out of nowhere in the Heisman voting. I don't know what he's going off at right now, but what's the best advice that you give to play the Heisman people? I mean, is it just put money on Arch and see what happens? Do you wait until a couple weeks in and try to get better value? Or do you have any futures that you're laying right now? I guess what's the advice that you'll give for betting the Heisman? Because we all know it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, and very rarely you're going to see the guy who's anointed as the future winner actually end up the winner. And I think some of that, comes with the expectations of being pegged as the best player in all of college football and trying to live up to that. And when you're looking at Arch Manning, he's a one-dimensional passer. I mean, He's going to be a very good one-dimensional passer. And sure, that's going to be fantastic. But I think back to Andrew Luck at Stanford. He was a one-dimensional fantastic passer who actually had some of that physical running style. And he kept getting edged out by different players every single year. And heck, Caleb Williams a couple years ago was supposed to be the guy before Jaden Daniels came in and just absolutely stole the show. And that happens every single year, to be honest with you. Travis Hunter wasn't even in the top 10 last season, despite having all of this acclaim and the two-way style. But I think when you're looking at the Heisman race, one, you have to find a guy that people are going to gravitate to, because this is a little bit of a popularity contest when you're talking about how that award is even given out. And so I'm looking for the guys who have our quarterbacks. That's just kind of who I dial in on first, unless you have just a crazy freak of a player at maybe running back or wide receiver, a split between wide receiver and cornerback. And at quarterback, I'm looking for a guy who is competent enough as a passer, but has legs. And that kind of leads me to a guy like I brought up, a Marcel Reed, for example, at Texas A&M, dynamic runner. He has a lot of velocity. The ball placement is erratic as hell. Like, who knows where that ball is going half the time, but if he can get it figured out, we've seen players figured out. I think about Lamar Jackson's early years at Louisville. He wasn't really throwing the ball at all. And all of a sudden, that competency as a passer not only elevated Louisville, but elevated his stock. And obviously, he ended up winning the Heisman.
Yeah, I think if Florida gets through their schedule, DJ Lagway is the obvious choice there. But I know Diego Pavia was kind of a darling last year. Is there a name of a guy, hey, keep an eye out for this guy that you think could maybe sneak their way in, or a guy that would end up maybe being our man crush by the end of the year? Like, the guy that everyone loves that could find his way to New York.
Well, obviously I love my Marcel Reed pick. That's one I'm probably going down on the sword with. But, aside from that, I think somebody who maybe nobody's talking about, who potentially could be a flat out bust, or potentially could be a guy that everybody's in love with 5 weeks into the season. Look at CJ Bailey at North Carolina State. That's another guy who is, a 6'4" dude, super lengthy, super fast and agile, and has a cannon. And it's just a matter of whether or not he can figure it out. He almost kind of reminds me of a Jalen Milroe to an extent, but he's a lot more kind of like wiry as a runner, as opposed to being like 6'2", 220. I'm going to bowl you over like Jalen Milroe was. And I think NC State, we'll see what happens, but they've got a nice flyer in their back pocket to make something happen here.
I thought maybe you would say an Iowa offensive player or their punter, but no Hawkeyes they're going with.
Hey, I love Reese Dakin, and I wish him the best as punting this season, but probably not for the Heisman in this case.
Okay, maybe a little dark horse down the road there, but hey, we'll have to play the mascot game during college basketball season. I consider myself the foremost aficionado and knower of all college mascots, like busting out of UC Santa Cruz Banana Slugs, Centenary College Gentlemen. It's a skill I have, Rob, that puts me as a 42-year-old single man talking to you right now. So impresses dudes in the bars, but doesn't do too much. But we'll have to do that during college basketball season. But I guess, man, just like lastly, I know you're busy. Appreciate the time. Let's touch on the college football playoff, and just a little bit of background here is I grew up kind of a Penn State fan. My grandfather went there. Hate their guts now. Since Maryland moved to the ACC after the whole, Sandusky situation. I bartended at a Penn State bar, and just the flat out arrogance and the, hey, we didn't do anything wrong and we were punished too harshly makes me want them to lose every single game. And I will bet James Franklin to cover 37-point spreads, but can I trust him to live up to this hype, to beat a team that is in the top 5 that he never beats? Can we expect just maybe another semifinal and out and they lose a game that they're supposed to, or is this Penn State's year? Maybe who are the 3 teams, Texas, Penn State, and who else do you think has a legitimate shot of winning this thing?
I can't get there with Penn State, and in large part, it's actually because of Drew Aller. Like, I get it. There are his bright moments are really, really bright. They're fantastic, but he almost reminds me of another Penn State quarterback that was getting first round hype, just 10 years ago, even Christian Hackenberg. And obviously the wheels, the wheels fell off the wagon there. And in large part, it was because how erratic he was in the intermediate, how erratic he was in the short area passing game. And I get it. Drew Aller's got a cannon. He's got athleticism. There's ways that he can will his team to win, even if he's not completing passes in a given day. But I feel like when they were winning big games last year, or even kind of staying close in games, they were doing so in spite of his abilities and in spite of his play on the field. And maybe he takes that step, but I feel like there was enough concerns watching his film back over this past year that I'm like, I don't really buy into this guy being, 1, a first round pick, or 2, kind of being the one who lights up college football this season.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for Penn State struggling and not being there. I just think obviously they're going to be favored in pretty much every game outside the Ohio State game. I mean, they get Oregon at home and the whiteout, so I mean, it would be a huge catastrophe for them if they did not at least get in and were a
Right.
high seed. And then from there, it's like we all knew it was going to be a Penn State Notre Dame semifinal based on the draw. So with things being changed, kind of with the seeding, hopefully that changes. But yeah, I mean, also Sarkeesian's kind of a guy who can't seem to get over the hump. I mean, is it going to be as simple as like your typical? I mean, we saw Ryan Day get there. Like, who's going to win it this year? I mean, there's a lot of teams with red flags, question marks. I mean, Texas is probably the best team on paper. Penn State has the most returners, but if you had to put one bet to win the national title, who would you bet on?
Yeah, it's a really interesting field, and I feel like this is one of the more open fields that we've seen because, again, when you look at the portal, when you look at how many teams are establishing a new high upside quarterback at that position, here's a crazy take. I think that every single team that we saw last year in the college football playoff might not be there this upcoming season. Like it
I was
might
going to
be an
ask you about
entire
that. Yeah.
it might be an entirely new field. I mean, Ohio State's breaking in a new quarterback, Tennessee, Indiana, Boise State is still obviously in that one kind of G5 slot, but tons of competition for that area right there. Penn State is the one consistent at their quarterback position, but I'm not really a believer. And so I feel like there's a number of teams that can burst into this bubble. I look at USC as a high upside team. I think Texas A&M is a high upside team. And heck, we'll see what Bryce Underwood looks like at Michigan too, just because they've got all the dudes everywhere else. It's just a matter of how can they figure out that quarterback position. And I think that's just kind of an interesting dynamic as we're looking at this field for the college football season.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to kind of ask you, I mean, over under a number of teams that of the 12 that don't make it this year. I mean, I think we could safely say probably five, six, at least half of the field in there, given all the question marks that you're saying. And Indiana will be there because they replaced Virginia with Kennesaw State. So, I mean, that Kennesaw State, Western Carolina murderer's row of a non conference schedule that they have, I'm sure will propel them in there. Hey, I can't hate on Signetti. He's doing a hell of a job, but, just play somebody. But hey,
Mhm.
the system is what the system is. If it gets them in, it gets them in. So it'll be very, very interesting to see who is this year's Indiana. So love the take on that. The thing that makes college football great is, we talk about how every week is kind of make or break. And with the 12-team college football playoff, it didn't really feel like that. But I actually think with so many teams being lumped in and how strong the SEC is, that it actually creates a little bit more drama now having the 12 teams in there. And first off, they shouldn't expand. But second off, that's another story. But it has created that kind of dynamic, and the middle of the pack kind of, so to speak, with all the question marks with the team like you brought up, is going to be awesome. So yeah, there could be about 20 teams vying for it. I mean, we might look up second to last week of the season and be like, if things break this way, like these teams could be in that we didn't expect, and a lot of the kind of Big 12 conference championship drama, but just on a national stage. So a lot of tiebreakers in place there. Well, Rob, I mean, you're the man, dude. Obviously, I get into this argument with a lot of people, and we'll leave it with this. So, give me a couple reasons why, when I always tell people this, why college football is better than the NFL, not just betting wise, but in general.
I think it's the fact that it ties in so many different communities. I'm out here in the state of Iowa where there's not a professional sports team within 4 hours of driving distance from me. And, yeah, sure. Could I have gravitated towards being a Packers fan or a Bears fan or a Vikings fan? Sure. But I don't feel like that's a true tie to the state of Iowa. And, 20 minutes away from me right now is sitting Kinnick Stadium. I can
Yeah,
pull up there for a game day. I can see all my friends. We can all interact with each other and be like, hey, let's go catch a game. And I think the sense of community when you're talking about 120 or 130 teams, I don't even know how many teams are in college football anymore. But when you're talking about that many teams and all of them having actually like a legitimate crack at a national platform when they make the playoff or maybe play in their conference championship game, I feel like that's the kind of accolades or things that you bring to the community that you can't acquire in any other way. It's like when somebody from your hometown is like, oh, that dude, I grew up next to that guy. Now he's playing in the NFL or he's a movie
yeah,
star. This is
yeah.
crazy. And we get to live that out through our guys that are out there playing football every single Saturday when they're tied to our communities. And so I think that's what makes it the best. And part of that also contributes to the atmosphere on game days. Everybody's cheering loud in the stadium. I just feel like there's nothing that really tops college football from the mass appeal and just the community tie-in.
Yeah, well, I'm a Towson Tiger alum, so the amount of people that we can produce that say, "Hey, I went to school with that guy," is Jermon Bushrod and Terrence West for me. So, but yeah, man, you're exactly right. I never understood the I'm a big NFL only kind of football fan kind of guy, and I think you're exactly right. The pageantry and college game day is the exact epitome of that show. I mean, how many times have guys like us just cried at 9 in the morning from watching one of those stories, about
Yeah.
the Georgia fan that got the heart from the Florida girl that died, that type of stuff. You don't see that in the NFL. And it's the pageantry and the tradition and the rivalries and everything that just makes it so special. Plus, I mean, obviously you have games on, Hawaii at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern time to get out of your hole or whatever. And just the stories
Yep.
with the draft that it creates too. It's like you're seeing these people come up out of nowhere and rise to become a first round, second round draft pick. So it's what makes it great, man. And you do an awesome, awesome job covering it and betting it. And, we appreciate all the content that you had, man. I appreciate you being on, and we'll definitely have to get on again. We'll have to get you out to Maryland here, have an Orange Crush. I would say go to CQ Stadium, but that's not really worth it when you go to Kinnick all the time. I wouldn't want to kind of downgrade you there, but we'll have to save that for basketball season when you could come to the Comcast Center down here and watch actually a good Maryland team in my Terps. And just a little, how do you think the Terps are going to be this year? Just in a couple minutes, Terps basketball. You think they're a tournament team? Yes or no?
Oh, Terps basketball. Yeah, I think they're a very interesting team. I think they're going to be better than last year, even. And, I would peg them as an NCAA tournament team. I think when you bring in and you import a successful roster, again, probably not a great strategy in football, but we just saw it with Ben McCollum and Drake last year, right? At Northwestern State going to Drake. Immediately they take over the Missouri Valley Conference, and now we'll see how Drake does at Iowa. But I think there's a number of different scenarios or examples you can point to of, hey, X coach went from here to there, imported his roster, and immediately found success. And I feel like Texas A&M, good team last year. So yeah, I'm behind the Terps at this point.
Well, we're going for the double of winning the TBT and the Natty, so we'll see how that goes. But one step closer to the TBT. But Rob, the Orioles covered, so you hit the over. So we're at 9 runs right now. So another good day, hopefully for Rob. But man, I appreciate it, man. We'll have to do this again sometime. And yeah, give Rob a follow if you want to plug your all your outlets one more time, man, for everybody.
Hey, yeah, sounds good, man. Thank you for inviting me on. I love talking college football, especially when we're actually starting to get closer to season. It feels a lot more real. And, for those who want to follow my college football bets or follow my Major League Baseball bets as we kind of lead up to the season, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'll have some AC/DC next time for you when you come on. So
Appreciate it.
all right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
Later.